Hey, Read Through the Word. Today is August 26th. We are that close to the end of the month. I know so many of you are waiting. I've talked about this before. And because New Testament's coming. And it's a hard part in our reading. So I'm glad you're here this close to the end of the Old Testament with us. It's some hard reading through here. And that's Ezekiel's hard. And then you're bouncing back between Jeremiah and 2 Kings and 2 Chronicles some and Ezekiel, and then now we're going to start putting some minor prophets in, and so yay that you are still here with us. And today my lesson is called, all right, we're ready? Nebby K. And we are 2 Kings 25, 8 through 12. And it says this. On August 14th of that year, which was the 19th year of King Nebuchadnezzar's reign, I can never say this, if you think about it too much, it makes it harder. Nebuzaradan, that's it. The captain of the guard, an official of the Babylonian king, arrived in Jerusalem. He burned down the temple of the Lord, the royal palace, and all the houses of Jerusalem. He destroyed all the important buildings in the city. He supervised the entire Babylonian army as they tore down the walls of Jerusalem on every side. Then, that guy again, the captain of the guard, took as exiles the rest of the people who remained in the city, the defectors who had declared their allegiance to the king of Babylon, and the rest of the population. So, 2 Kings 25, 8 through 12. So, today's lesson is all about Nebby K. So, if you look at your something old today, it's from last year. I remember talking about this. Is King Jehoiachin as he goes into Babylon and what happens with him. So, if you're interested in learning more about that, go back to last year on this date. So, it would have been August 26th of 2021. It might be 2020 at this point. I don't see how Wendy remembers what she's done over the years. I started in June of 2020. So I'm just starting here. And when I start reading, I go, oh, I remember talking about this. So we're talking today about Nebby K. Now, some of you may remember that I think I do this with every class I teach. But last year and the year before that, when I was teaching middle school Bible at my school, I used to tell the students, I am okay with calling Nebuchadnezzar Nebby K on a test because no one can agree on the correct spelling of his name anyway. You see some places say it Nebuchadnezzar, some say Nebuchadnezzar, and I said, if Nebby K worked for VeggieTales, I'm okay with it. And so that's why I call him Nebby K. And so I want to talk about Nebuchadnezzar for a little bit. And I got a few rabbit trails for you that we don't have time to go down. So I'm going to talk about the stuff I want to talk about. And then I'm going to give you a few things that you go and run. And if you run them down and want to talk more about it, please put it in the comments. I try to keep checking for new comments. Y'all know I'm not techie. Linda's the techie one. I keep checking back to see when people comment. So I try my best to get in there and comment back to you when you comment to me. So if you follow the rabbit trails, I want to know. And we'll talk more about it. Okay, so Nebuchadnezzar II is who actually is. He is the greatest villain in the Old Testament. Well, next to Satan. But the greatest villain in the Old Testament. He's considered the greatest king of the Babylonian Empire. There's so much I want to tell you. But, okay, first, he is known through legend for the construction of one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Although there's no evidence that the Hanging Gardens of Babylon actually ever existed where they think they did, and in the time period they think they would have been. So they say that Nebuchadnezzar built them for his favorite wife to remind her of the green areas she came from. But as to now, they've not found archaeological evidence, nor do you find it in any records, not in any of the Babylonian records, or there's like one place in some Roman records that say something about it, but we don't know if it's true or if it's just legend. But there is some thought that there were gardens, just not at that place and not at that time, but also with another king mentioned in the Bible. So I'm putting a link to that article for you. So go read. It's pretty. Some of y'all like this kind of stuff. So go read it. It's in there. All right. He's mentioned over 90 times in the Bible. Much is said of him before we've ever gotten to our readings in Daniel. So when we get to Daniel, we'll talk more about Nebby K. And he conquered Judah. So right here we're seeing he conquered Judah. No, and we talked about that it was in 3 different waves as it happened. So he conquered Judah, he destroyed the temple, and he deported most of the residents of Judah to Babylon, which will go into exile, which is where Ezekiel is. And Ezekiel, remember we talked about this? Ezekiel in the land, and Daniel will be in the palace. And by the time the destruction of the temples come, we talked about this last week, that Daniel has been there for quite a while at this point. Nebby K serves as God's instrument of judgment on Judah. I mean, Jeremiah 25:9 talks about that. He's mentioned 4 times as God's servant. NLT calls him God's deputy. So that verse 25:9 says, calls Nebuchadnezzar God's deputy. Now, we could start lots of conversations about what that means. And we'll talk a little more about it when we get to the book of Daniel. And we see more of the later life of Nebuchadnezzar. So, history records him as brutal, powerful, and ambitious. And here's the thing. So, here's part of chasing the rabbit trails I like to go down. Here's the thing about Nebuchadnezzar. Now, if we had my famous map that I always see behind me, whether you see it or not, you would see Babylon. Now, what's interesting is one of my dearest friends at school, she teaches, when we teach at the same school, I do English 1 and 2, and she does English 3 and 4, and then does some history, the history classes, American history, and government, and those type of things. One of the greatest teachers you could ever hope to sit under. Actually had taught for schools and retired from that, came out of retirement to teach back at our school, and well loved in our community, and just a dear friend of mine. And so, and sometimes she joins us on here. So, she teaches a Sunday school class, and throughout the week teaches at school, and then is always teaching something else. She's just the best. So her name is Nora, and I love Nora. I just adore her. And she and I were actually having this discussion today. She's teaching an elective called Perspectives in History at our school. And so right now, like across time, she had her students, this is fantastic, had her students choose throughout time, what do you think are the most impactful things that have happened throughout history that you want to know more about? And so what she's doing right now, so she and I were talking, And she's doing the Tower of Babel. And I was like, oh, there is so much there. And it's one of my favorite things to talk about. So, and I said, hey, I am teaching all about Nebuchadnezzar and Babylon. And I said, oh, it is so much fun to she said, that's the problem. I want to chase all the rabbit trails too. But, so, here's the thing to think about. That the plain of Shinar is between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. The plain of Shinar is where the people decided in Genesis chapter 11 to construct the Tower of Babel. When they were supposed to have spread out around the world, but they camped out in the plain of Shinar. I can't speak. Plain of Shinar is probably pronounced some other way, but that's the southern pronunciation of it. So, they hung out there and defied God. And so, since that, and that's where Tower of Babel is where Babylon is. All throughout Scripture, you chase the name Babylon. It never means anything good. And so, if you were to connect, I'm just telling you, start with Genesis. We look at Nebuchadnezzar here. We actually, if you look at Abraham, so that was Genesis 11. You pick up in Genesis 12 with Abraham. He is living over in Ur, so at the mouth of the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers. So if you chase all of these people who want to shake their fist at God, if you look at the culture that Abram was called out of at that point, that's what they were doing. And so then you had seen that that's what was going on at the Tower of Babel. Then you see Ur and the ziggurats to the moon goddess and all these different things that are going on there. And all throughout history is this, I'm going to shake my fist at God. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar does. Nebuchadnezzar has, which that's why those of you who know what's coming in Daniel, he gets his moment to remember who is in charge. And that's what I want to talk about. Because here's another thing that I'm going to add to your rabbit trails. Babylon showed up big in recent world history. I guess this would have been the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s with Saddam Hussein. Now, I've said Nebuchadnezzar reigned for 43 years in the Babylonian Empire. He's known for his cruelty. He's known for his huge building projects. He built the Ishtar Gate. Actually, some people thought that's all he had done was huge construction projects. But archaeology also recorded what a man of war he was, which we have seen evidence of here too. But in the 20th century, Saddam Hussein attempted to rebuild the Babylonian Empire of King Nebuchadnezzar. So a lot of that, rebuilt the Ishtar Gate, all with bricks that had Saddam Hussein, son of Nebuchadnezzar, written on them. And many architecture and of historical relevance things that after the wars were just left. And so I think I gave you a link to look at some little bit more information of that. But he rebuilt the Ishtar Gate that Nebuchadnezzar had built. So it's just an interesting thing that you could trace all through history. But at the center is King Nebuchadnezzar. And God uses him. Proverbs 21:1 tells us that God is in charge of the hearts of kings and pushes them in the way he would want. So when you talk about Nebuchadnezzar as God's deputy, God's servant, God uses him for his purposes. And we'll talk more about Nebuchadnezzar when we get to Daniel. But it's a great reminder that Babylon still shows up in history, even now. Baghdad. So Baghdad is Babylon, and that's what Saddam Hussein rebuilt, was at Baghdad. And that is Babylon. And that it's still relevant today. And it was relevant in Genesis 11. So that's a lot of history and a lot of things that God is doing throughout history to prove this point. The Lord is God. He made us. We are His. He is in control. Psalm 100 says it this way: we are His people, the sheep of His pasture. But I think so many times we get wrapped up with things going on, we forget that He really is in charge. And we can see that through the life of Nebby K. Just watch what's going to happen with him. We'll see you next time on Read Through the Word.